Hi folks, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Andy Chaplin, and co-host Neil Geddes-Ward. Neil, how's it going?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. I've been very, very busy as usual. I finished one load of paintings and I'm now about to start the next one of the Titanic for someone. My old school teacher, would you believe? His grandfather actually put the rivets in the Titanic, he told me, which was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a claim to fame, but not particularly a good claim to fame given the circumstances.
Yeah, and it might explain why he's got a box of rivets at home from the Titanic. He obviously didn't put enough in. But it's actually led me to some interesting avenues. But tell me how you've been doing, then I'll tell you some interesting things that I found out about the Titanic as part of my research, some spooky wooey stuff about the Titanic. So what's been happening to you?
Well, there's two things, main things that are happening in my life at the moment. One of them is a Shadow Man incident, and the other is TV. Which would you like me to talk about first?
Tell me about the TV thing first.
Right, okay. So I've got to be careful here because it is ongoing in terms of filming, and I can't give the finer details because there's a bit of a confidentiality thing. But I can tell you it is national. It will go out nationally. It is very exciting. It is psychic themed. And come September, it's going to air, and it's going to be very, very daunting, actually, because it's going to go out nationally, basically. It's not actual real psychic reading, so it's not me doing readings as such, but the theme is psychic, and that's as much as I can say. But there's going to be a lot of famous faces, and recently, which is what's quite interesting, is that they, whilst acting and kind of like the takes between the acting, they've got quite an interest, the lead roles, in the psychic industry and what we're doing. They didn't actually realize we were psychics. So I was approached through tuned in events, organizing psychic fairs and stuff, to bring in stalls and dress it all up and make it look like a psychic event. But the actors actually thought it was kind of like, props and kind of like, actors brought in to be psychic. So once they found out that's what we actually do, then they started asking us doing readings, and I ended up doing a few little readings for some quite famous faces, which I can't divulge at the moment, but was quite daunting and quite fun at the same time.
Wow. So is this for Channel 5 by any chance?
I can't tell you.
Because it's the sort of thing that Channel 5 would seem to do. That's just my take on it. But
it's not, for instance, a documentary type thing that goes around, kind of airport style. It's not a docu-soap. It is fiction. The whole thing is fiction. It's a story. It's got actors. It's got like a fictional storyline. I can't tell you anything about it or who's in it. But
did you have to act in it then, as such?
A little bit, yeah. So technically, I'm an extra. I haven't got any speaking parts, and I haven't got any lead roles. So you've got lead roles, and then you've got supporting people. We our kind of tuned in events team are slightly one up above the regular extras. So you've got regular extras that are playing customers coming into the psychic fair dressed normally. We're dressed a little bit woo-woo. We're a little bit witchy and a bit gothy and a bit kind of like psychic-y. And there's a few shocked expressions and things like that that's going on. So and another claim to fame, actually, which is I really enjoyed, is that I told them that my my kind of like second job, if you like, is doing graphic design and posters and stuff like that. And I showed them some of the posters that I do for my real events at Tuned In Events on Facebook, Tuned In Events, if anyone wants to go and have a look. And they loved the posters, and their graphic designer was actually snowed under doing other things. They said, Andy, do you want to do some posters for it? And I said, yeah. And I ended up doing about 4 posters and a banner for them, which are going to be very prominent for their hero actors, is what they call them, hero actors. So I'm chuffed to bits. It's absolutely tiring. It's 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 at night. There's a lot of running around, a lot of craziness, but I'm just having a whale of a time, an absolute blast.
So is it still carrying on, this thing?
It's still coming on. Yeah. So we've had last week, and we had a dressing up at the stalls. That was one day. Then we had 2 days of filming. Thursday was a break, so we did Wednesday and Friday filming. And now tomorrow I've got to get up 5 o'clock in the morning, go all the way to the location, stay over there. They're actually paying for an Airbnb over there, so for me. Because I didn't want to tackle the M25. Absolute nightmare.
Who's looking after your cat then?
My family are looking after my cat.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, my 2 little cats.
Yeah, you can't have a little cat sitting on your stool then.
Oh, that'd be very funny. Actually, my little Jessie, she'd be perfect because she's almost black all over. So,
brilliant. Excellent. That sounds fun, because I've done a bit of background artwork, background artist work for Oh, crikey, the Midsummer Murders, and so is
Oh, okay.
Ashley. Ashley's done it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
We actually worked on one together, but they are very long days, and a lot of it is just sitting around. Maybe you're doing less of that, but not my cup of tea for
Yeah,
for,
it's
for
to me, it feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and
Mm.
I as soon as it was handed to me, because how I got it is that I know a psychic friend of mine who I met randomly on a ghost walk just once, and it happens that the art director's wife knows her, and he knows that she's into the woo woo stuff, so he asked her, and she asked me, and that's how I got into it, and I just thought that comes along, I'll grab that.
Yeah, yeah.
Grab-
Sometimes these things can snowball into other things you never envisaged, which is really good.
yeah.
And so what happened to your this shadow man? Because you went out for a walk or something, didn't you?
Oh, this is a fascinating one. Okay, so when I first got into the woo-woo stuff, Neil, this was around about year 2000. I was very much into kind of the love and light and angels and fairies and everything's wonderful and it's all fluffy and rainbows and stuff. And as you know, things got bloody weird. So the more I was meditating and tuning in and doing readings and getting kind of like, without sounding like big-headed, I was getting quite in tune with the universe and with kind of source and spirit and all that kind of thing. I then started getting harassment stuff. I then started getting helicopters, and I started getting weird phone calls and people flashing headlights and all that kind of weird woo-woo stuff, which has basically gone away for decades. And then kind of like this one particular time, I think it was last Tuesday, I went for a walk and I noticed this helicopter buzzing around. I'm pretty certain it was like a police helicopter, but it gets relevant as the story goes on. So I'm in this field, I'm walking along, this helicopter's kind of circling around. It's almost like it's looking at me. But the thing is, if I was on the run, I would be running, and I wasn't. I was just casually plodding along. So I thought, oh, please go away. It's just bloody annoying. So eventually the helicopter disappears. I carry on down the river, and the whole route that I do is a circle, is around about 6 miles. So let's say I've done about maybe kind of 4 miles or so, and I'm hitting a nature reserve. I sit down, meditate, and kind of like I'm feeling kind of quite zen and kind of like quite tuned in. This is before the filming actually starts, so I'm trying to get as relaxed as possible. Um, this bloody helicopter comes along. I'm there in this nature reserve, got this wonderful kind of view in front of me, a lovely lake, and this helicopter is right in front of me, and it's buzzing around again right in front of me. And at one point it hovers and it's just looking at me. It's just kind of hovering there looking at me, and I'm thinking, do I look like a missing person? Do I look like a fugitive on the run? If I'm on the run, I'm going to be hiding in a bush, not sat there looking at you, but here they are kind of like buzzing. It may or may not be relevant, but I kind of think maybe thinking back to when I was doing the love and light stuff, and then the helicopters and harassment came, maybe it is relevant. So anyway, as it's getting dark, this is kind of like towards getting towards the evening, and it's getting darker. I'm sitting there meditating, and I'm seeing this shape to the side of me kind of come in and then come out. And the only way I can put it, it didn't really seem like a human shape, but if it was, it'd be a very, very small person. And it wasn't really a fox or dog shape. It seemed bigger than that. And I wasn't expecting spooks, but I was expecting this shape to kind of like come into view and either carry on walking or something like that, but it didn't. And I thought, oh, that's strange. So I got up and then I carried on walking. At this point, I still wasn't thinking spooks or anything woo-woo. So I carry on walking, go down the other side of the river, and then start making my way back to the house. Here's where it gets really interesting. So if you imagine like a grassy pathway with a river on the right-hand side, I was walking along here. At this point, it was fairly dark, but not completely dark. On the right-hand side, there was kind of like a fence, like a metal fence with like a river and like a weir. There didn't seem to be anyone else on this path. It was just me. As I was walking along, I was in my kind of own little world, kind of thinking to myself and stuff. And I just suddenly noticed this shape, and it was definitely 100% a human shape. Now, I know there's this word, pareidolia or something like that.
Pareidolia, yeah.
That's it, where you kind of look at things and your brain kind of interprets shapes. None of that. I'm not accepting any of that. It was a human shape. Now, at this particular point, I wasn't thinking spooks or ghosts. I was thinking maybe a teenager having a spliff, or kids hanging out. Because when I go for walks, I do encounter people, and there is sometimes people kind of like having a quick fag, or for American audiences, that means a cigarette, by the way.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
In case you get, yeah, fag means cigarette in English. And often there are spots on my walk where you smell weed quite a lot, so there's a lot of that going on. That's fine. Walking along, as I get to this shape, I'm thinking to myself, that is definitely a human shape. But the weird thing is, I was trying to work out, is it my shadow? Because there was car headlamps in the distance shining, and you do get a bit of like a shadow thing, but it wasn't really going. It wasn't my shadow because it wasn't my shape, and it wasn't moving in time to my walking. It was basically a shadow that was separate for me. It then, as I walked past, melted into the fence. So any kind of notions of it being a physical person or somebody actually there hiding, they couldn't have hidden. It's a metal fence. The only thing beyond that fence is water. It's a river. It basically melted. And I was kind of like trying to work out if it was a shadow. I was moving to see if it was a car headlamp shadow. It just wasn't. It wasn't. So I thought, okay, that's nice. Carried on walking. And then I kind of like looked back and I just thought, I wonder what that was. I wonder what that. Couldn't see anything. No people. No movement. Nothing. So yeah, that happened.
Freaky. Yeah. Any opinions of what it may be from your friends and things?
I personally believe it was a shadow man. I've got no other. I will not accept the explanation of pareidolia. I will not accept that because it wasn't. It was a head. It was the shoulders. It was a person. End of story.
Wow.
It was. And I said to myself, I kind of in my own mind, like that is. I was kind of elated. Kind of. It wasn't scary and it wasn't threatening. It was just odd. And inside of me, I was just like, that is rare. That is rare to get that because I've had woo-woo stuff, but I haven't had it for quite some time. And I've actually put on my Facebook. I might put it on the Paranormal Peep Show Facebook group. The circumstances of it. I've taken some pictures of it and video of it when it was slightly lighter, but it does show that.
That'd be really good, so that we could all kind of chip in with a few opinions and things like that. Well, I think what we'll do, we'll maybe discuss that and more in a minute. We'll get to our guest, but I will talk about the Titanic because it's something I'm interested in. But we'll talk about it with our guest because I know that prior to us coming on, we had a little brief chat with our guest, and he's got some interesting information about the Titanic. So hopefully he'll be still there. We'll welcome him from the United States, Mr. Brandon Thomas of Expanding Reality Podcast. So are you there, Brandon?
I am here.
Brandon's here. Hello, Brandon.
Hello, Brandon. How you doing?
Hey guys, how are you?
Thank you for joining us. We're fine. Well, you obviously heard Andy's mysterious shadow person story. Has that spooked you up?
What I will say about it is whatever happened down by the lake, Andy, good call on the clarification for your American audience. I appreciate that.
I thought we were just going to get some extra subscribers.
Yeah, I was like, how progressive. Okay, good deal. And another one, I wanted to congratulate you on your reboot of Faulty Towers. That sounds like a really interesting interpretation that you're on there.
Faulty Towers? Which bit?
So you're doing a TV show you won't tell us about, and it's really radical and progressive. And Faulty Towers was the only British TV show I could think of to say.
Okay. I was trying to think, is there something that you know that we don't know? Yeah.
As long as I can put you boys on your heels right when we start, I'm good. Then we're good. Off to a great start.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us. Now, I said the United States, but we're not absolutely clear where in the United States you are. So where are you for our listeners?
The greatest country in the world, Texas.
Texas, which is a country by itself, Texas. Okay, fantastic. And I said, is it a farm or ranch? And you said that you run a ranch out there and you're continually picking up snakes, trying to eat eggs of the hens. But today, you picked up a poisonous snake. Is that right?
Well, I actually accidentally mowed over it when I was out mowing the field because we have about 12 acres out here and I mow it pretty much to be like a golf course. And so we get really nice green grass for the animals all year round and all that good stuff. So I'm on one of those zero turn things, those commercial mowers, spared no expense on that thing. And it has been worth it every step of the way. So I see this little thing and unfortunately I'm riding a weapon and the grass was pretty tall. And so, I've got these 3 huge blades spinning. And that's it. It's just bye-bye venomous snake. Yeah, it's the first venomous snake I've seen out here in almost 6 years since we've been living here.
So what is it?
Harmless.
What does it taste like?
I'll let you know. We're grilling it up after this. Actually, I'll send you some boots. Yeah,
that's it. Cool. Now you run the Expanding Reality podcast. Now, obviously, I've taken part in it, and he's going to take part in it in the next week or two. For the benefit of our listeners and our viewers, what is the Expanding Reality podcast, and how did it come about?
Grateful you asked and grateful for your time on it. Andy, looking forward to having you on as well. So that show came about because I'm into so many different subjects. And thank you for appearing on the show, Neil. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I got a lot of great feedback on that episode. So Yes. So the idea of the show is what I like about it most. I cover a wide variety of topics, anywhere from, of course, UFOs, UAPs, aliens, entities, interdimensionals, time travel. I've had James Fox from The Phenomenon on. I've had Neil Donald Walsh, who was the author of the Conversations with
Ah,
God book series on.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Fascinating guy.
yeah,
That was a
yeah.
personal hero of mine. He really changed my perception, got me into spirituality. He, and I say this a lot, is the reason that I'm not an atheist, is because of Neil Donald Walsh. He gave me an alternate perspective to explore and then, of course, expand on. So spiritualism. We've had a business storyteller on, a young lady that has her own business. So entrepreneurs, psychologists, it is such a wide variety of topics. And that's why, thus the name of the show, Expanding Reality. That's what it's about. Now, the interesting part about my show in particular is I'm not trying to get to the bottom of anything. I'm not here to tell people that their experiences are wrong, like Stephanie Patel, who's been channeling Steve Jobs. I'm not here to tell her that she's wrong or that she's a liar or that I don't believe her. On my show in particular, we just discuss the ideas in an open format, and I love the thought experiments. That to me is one of the best things. So that's why I love my show so much, is just because of the mantra of it. Let's just bring the ideas forward and with no judgment and an open mind, and talk about really cool stuff. And I've really enjoyed it. So it's been
Excellent.
awesome.
So I mean, obviously, you started to decide to do this podcast, and you've been into this kind of alternative stuff for years as a kid, or what started that ball rolling?
I would say that I hit spirituality before I hit conspiracies. Sometimes they're the other way around, but usually, if a person is spiritual, they're also into conspiracies, and same and vice versa. So
I
Yeah.
totally hear
mine
you
actually
there.
came
Totally
about,
hear you there.
right? Which
Yeah.
was yours, Andy? What order was yours to?
I start as I said previously. I started off love and light and rainbows and fluffy clouds, and then I started getting the helicopters and the weird shit happening. So yeah,
It was
spirituality first, and then conspiracy for me.
Yeah, okay, there you go. See, we align on that. So with me, it was getting Neil Donald Walsh's book in my hands when I was 18 years old. So at about then, I mean, I've always been, and I was doing psychedelics before that, so I've been into the alternative perspectives, I would say, for quite a while before that. But when I got that book, it ended up being something that just completely changed my mind and opened me open to new doors. And then the thing happened in New York, and that opened me to a lot more doors. And so it's been this journey just to explore the ideas and just enjoy the possibilities of this crazy reality, whatever it is that we live in.
Mm. Mm.
Neil,
And go on.
we must get Neil Donald Walsh. If you could connect us with him, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic. Because
Would be
I've
slightly
looked into this
confusing.
as
Two
well.
Neils, but
Two
one's
Neil.
God and one isn't.
Yeah, I totally hear what you mean by a hero of yours, because I got into conversations with God around about, again, 2000. As I was getting into the spiritualism side of things, I was also reading Neil Donald Walsh's stuff. And if you haven't read them, Neil, definitely do read them.
I've read the first one. It was a second book or third book as well.
He's done
Three-
so many, but yeah.
Yeah, 3 total in that series. He's actually done 39 books in
Oh,
37
wow.
different languages.
Wow.
And his newest one, The God Solution, is why I was able to get an interview with him. If you want to take the literal sense, I think cosmically I attracted it, but that's another conversation for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, so he's written a ton of books. And then, so it's been 2 really that have changed my life. It's been that one, of course, and then The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. That one just, and that's the one that I sent to Philip and Ronnie Kinsella. I
Right.
included that.
Right.
That
Because
book.
you interviewed our friends, twin souls, Ronnie and Philip Kinsella, a month or two back, and you very kindly sent Ronnie some special sunglasses to enable him to see in color or something, didn't you? Because he's colorblind.
Yes. So when I found out on the show actually that he was a colorblind artist, I was like, well, these things are easy to come across. The man's never seen color. And I asked him if he'd ever seen through those things, and he said no. And I just had to. It's one of those calling things. You just you do it. So I just boxed a pair up and sent them to him, and I think he enjoyed them. So it was really,
yeah.
really sweet message. So.
It sounds fantastic. I never knew such things existed either. So
I didn't.
Wow. So we were discussing the Titanic before the show, and I was
Actually,
like,
Neil, could I jump in before the Titanic thing?
Sure.
Now, Brandon, you're on a ranch, don't you?
Yes.
So, got to ask this: is it haunted? Is there any kind of Skinwalker Ranch things going on? Any UFO activities going on?
Unfortunately, no.
No.
That's an anticlimax. Let's go to the Titanic now.
No, what's interesting about it is the place definitely has a feel to it, and everybody that comes out here says the same thing. They're like, "Man, this place just feels different. It's very comfortable. It's very warm. It's very It feels if there's any presence here, it's definitely a benevolent presence, and it feels like it's out here for our best interests and to take care of us and protect us.
That's
We've
good.
never had any animals get lost to predation or get out. The
Yeah.
only ones that we've had are hawks and owls, which that's been a different thing. You can't really control that. So
Yeah.
they have the air superiority, other than that, man, we've just had fantastic luck out here. So that's the ironic part, right? I'm into all of this stuff, the paranormal, UFOs, and I've never seen a damn one of them. I'm not
really?
an experiencer myself. I find it fascinating. I'm open to it, absolutely, but it just hadn't come knocking yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm interested in UFOs big time, and I've never seen one, which is really annoying. But Stanton Friedman, the famous UFO researcher who was a nuclear physicist guy, really good researcher who died about 2 years ago, he had never seen a UFO, and yet he wrote loads of books on them, did loads of talks on them and everything.
I didn't know that you'd never seen one.
Yeah, never saw one. But he wrote a book, Flying Saucers, how they worked, that kind of thing, Amazing stuff.
It's weird because there's some people that I've met in the spiritualist community who can never get a reading. Nobody can tune into them. No mediums can get anything, not a damn thing for them. It's so bizarre, and I don't know why that is.
They're walking around in clothes that must be like Faraday cages,
could
covered in brass or something, or wire.
It's like, the chain meal. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Discard that, and you'll get in.
Yeah. So we were talking about the Titanic, and obviously we're going to discuss Brandon's interest, but as it's a nice little launching platform, because I was saying about earlier the fact that I'm going to be doing this painting of the Titanic. So I've been lent some books by my former school teacher, and I was been reading some just to get a little bit of background on it, and it's very interesting. It sort of talked about you talked about the conspiracy theory of J.P. Morgan, the big financier, and most people understand the Titanic. It struck an iceberg. It ripped all the segments of the hull apart, and over a 2.5 hour period, it sunk to the bottom of the ocean. But you, Brandon, suggested that there's some information out there that's, a theory that maybe it was deliberately sunk, or so the story was said it was sunk. What's the background of that?
Yeah, it's one of two things, right? So it's either this huge conspiracy that J.P. Morgan and one other fellow, I want to say it was Rockefeller or Rothschild, probably one of either, wanted to establish the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, which of course every dollar it prints has a debt attached to it. So you keep people in this perpetual debt cycle system. And that's how the economy works. Unfortunately, that's the model that we have. And that's what they went with, because there were 3 men who were going to speak out against that and vote against it that were on the Titanic. Now, they'd all planned to go on this voyage together. Maiden voyage, big deal, very publicized. And so, but at the last minute, JP Morgan, and I want to say one of the demon R guys, pulled out. And so they canceled literally the last minute. Those 3 gentlemen that were going to vote against it and therefore have the majority and, pun intended, sink the idea of the Federal Reserve in the United States, went down with the ship, and so did their idea. And that's why we have the economic system we do in the United States.
How the course of history changes because of an iceberg. It's very peculiar, isn't it?
I like that.
I've also heard. I've heard that I think JFK was going to reverse that, like the whole fiat system.
Yep.
And there's a kind of thing about why JFK got taken out, because he was literally going to kind of what was he going to do? He was going to kind of put the American dollar back on either the gold standard or the silver standard. I think it might have been the gold standard, and basically get rid of like the banksters that are basically screwing America.
Yes, and this happened twice in our previous history as well with 2 other famous presidents. So I want to say Abraham Lincoln for sure wanted to go to the gold standard, and he was very against centralized banking, and we saw what happened to him. And then Andrew Jackson as well, Stonewall Jackson, he wanted to do the greenbacks, which were value for value, dollar-based system, and he got impeached. The only, I think, U.S. president to be impeached before one of the other ones. If you
Clinton.
I think it was Clinton, right?
Clinton never got impeached.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
They tried to.
They tried to. It didn't happen. Happen.
Okay.
Yeah, so they didn't take old Andy out, but they definitely discredited him, ruined his career, and then he was impeached. So because of that, so you see what happens when you try and mess with these.
And go on.
I was going to say the second theory, if it's not that whole nefarious plan, is that they found a bunch of rivets missing from the side of the Titanic whenever it was on the bottom of the ocean. So maybe
my teacher,
about that, Neil?
Yeah. My old teacher, his grandfather put the rivets in. And he did come home with a spare box on a Friday night, right, for his chicken shed.
That's the other theory. I don't know. Whichever one's more likely.
I think that's more plausible.
Okay.
So, but yeah, on the spooky side of the Titanic, various people did have prophetic dreams. And one of the guys who was in the orchestra, he was like 28. His mum said, "Don't go on the Titanic. Don't go on that voyage. I've just had a prophetic dream. It's all going to go disastrously wrong." And he said, "I've got to go. It's my job. If I don't go on this thing, I'm going to get fired." And he went on there and he never came back. And the violins and that still played till the last points of the ship sunk. And the other interesting thing, it's a funny story I was relating to you about this guy who's on the Titanic. He was a bit of a tennis star, apparently. He was 21 years old, and he was going to go to America to go to Harvard University, but he was quite a well-known tennis star, and he was walking around on deck helping people get into the lifeboats, being quite a hero. And he found a steward trying to pull a door open where one of the rich passenger ladies was behind it, and she was panicking. She couldn't get out. So this kind of tennis star, this big sort of bulky guy, he managed to use his shoulder and he pushed this door open, Hollywood style, got the door open, and they got the woman out. And the steward who was there with him said, "Well, I'm going to have to report you to the company for damage to the company property," which is absolutely crazy.
That's
but yeah,
for you.
But about 13 years before the Titanic ever set sail, someone had written a novel called The Titanic, or The Voyage of the Titanica, or something like that. And it was a fictional book where the world's largest ocean liner in the story sailed on its maiden voyage to America, and it struck an iceberg, and all its crew were killed, and passengers, and most of them died in the story. And it was 13 years before the Titanic ever set sail, and it had so many parallels to the later story of the Titanic, the real story, that it was just uncanny. And the ship was called the Titanica or something, or the Titan. Perhaps it's called the Titan. And it even weighed the same size. It's about the same size and same length as everything else. It's almost like they're writing reality, and then reality comes true. And that's like happening in cartoons, like of the Twin Towers, in like various Marvel cartoons where they're showing the Twin Towers on fire and things like that. That's weird.
Or it's an element called predictive programming, which is very, very interesting. So you have these conspiracy theories that say, just like you said, the Twin Towers type of a deal. Also, a few years before, there was a movie with Denzel Washington called The Siege, and in that, the Twin Towers are attacked, and then a few years later, it actually happened. And so this is an idea that it is a predictive programming type of a thing that's either happening in life, scripted by the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, or it is one of those things like a tulpa, like a thought form, like a manifestation of a collective consciousness that can then come true in the future based on the idea that it exists now.
And we've discussed tulpas on previous shows, haven't we, Andy, where spirits have been created for seances and things like that. So
interestingly, this is when we get into things like channels and kind of mediums and things, basically saying that we create our own reality. And sometimes that doesn't quite sink in with people, but if you really think about it, if we really do create our reality, as Brandon says, are we kind of like scripting events into our lives that we think is some kind of like strange kind of etheric kind of dark force, but is it actually coming from within us? It goes down to very, very strange little rabbit holes.
Well, it's like, on the inner level, on the dream level, where the authors are our own dreams. And if we don't accept it in the dream that we're creating it because we're running from monsters or demons in the dream, but it's all part of in our psyche. No one else can say, oh, sorry about that, because it's in your head, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes I actually listen to YouTube to help me sleep. And I was listening to Ben Emlyn Jones, another guest and friend of ours, and he had gone to the cinema to see a rerun at the cinema of Lord of the Rings, literally about a week ago. And I was listening to his review of it, and I fell asleep. And so the dream then came about where I was in Lord of the Rings, wearing the armor with the sword and stuff like that. I don't think Ben was in with. I could hear his voice talking, and he's like talking me through the dream.
I would love it. the Hobbit and that.
But yeah, but so in a sense, his suggestions was then influencing my dream and stuff. So maybe in the same way that these books being written about the Titanic, the suggestions are creating en masse like a psychic dream for everybody to then partake in a drama. I mean, we talk about Seth. I don't know if you're aware of Seth material, which
Seth speaks right back.
Seth speaks exactly. He would talk about psychic dramas on the inner level of experience, where all these events happening are actually played out on an inner world of thought, if you like, in a, you know, the unknown reality. I think he's written books, and it's in some unknown reality. All these dramas and occurrences happen on an inner level, first of all, tested out. And if everyone agrees on a subconscious level that that's what they want, that reality will then manifest, and we all then partake as actors on the stage. Some will die, some will exit stage left, and some will go on to greater things or sadder things and things like that. And it's just each day these events are happening, but we're creating them in our sleep as such. It's a weird thing to get your head around. But he says also our thoughts create them. What's that?
What do you think's going on, Brandon? Do you think we're creating it, or do you think there's some dark force creating it for us and warning us through predictive programming?
You know, so my policy, of course, is I don't plant my flag on any real belief. Okay. There's a line from a movie here in America called Dogma, and it was a Kevin Smith movie. It was a comedy, but one of the most poignant lines in there that really stuck with me is the Chris Rock character in that movie says, "I don't have beliefs, I have ideas, because ideas are easy to change. Beliefs are very hard to change." That's when you get locked into cognitive dissonance. That's when even challenging your religion, your belief about what we live on, a round ball, flat earth, whatever. Anytime new information is presented, then you fight against it so hard that it creates like this fear-based defense mechanism to just keep the illusion going, whatever that is. Now, if you want to subscribe to the thought that, you know, this is a holographic universe and that we are just creating our reality one step at a time, you know, to what you said, Neil, about the internalization and running a scenario, basically, it's almost like running a simulation. And so whenever astronomers will run simulations on the path of asteroids and where they're going to, you know, how close they're going to pass Earth and things like that, those things, then they can run a simulation on it, and then it can pass or go exactly as they thought based on the data inputted. So if we are collectively creating a fear-based reality, if we're scared of everything, if we are in a survival mode, in a divisive kind of a concept that was created for us, this is the interesting thing, is it may have been a contrived idea that then is pushed by people more aware of how powerful we are than we are aware of how powerful we are. And therefore the narrative can be scripted for you. And, you know, what do they say? 90% of your actions are subconscious actions anyway. So, you know, these are automatic things that you do. Driving your car, most people don't even think about it. You just drive and it's aimless. And some people, that's why they end up in places that they weren't supposed to be at, because they weren't even thinking. They're on basically like an autopilot. Now, I'm under the idea, I lean heavily more on the idea that we do literally create our reality. And if that's the case, then we're creating it all the time, whether consciously or unconsciously. So it's when you consciously create your reality that you're able to actually manifest and enjoy the things that you choose to, rather than being the decision being made for you based on a system or anything like that.
It's almost like learning to become lucid dreaming.
Yes.
Isn't it? And I think that if you can master lucid dreaming, which I've discovered I have lucid dreamed in the past and kind of got the partial hang of it. If you can do that all the time, I think then you can create that reality consciously more so in your waking state. But the thing about lucid dreaming is that, and I've read this in books, is that you kind of realize you are dreaming, but there's still part of you that still plays along with it in the drama.
Can I give you a couple of examples that I had, Neil? Of lucid dreaming. They were absolutely fantastic. Okay, so the time of day or night that this happened was just as I was beginning to wake up. Okay, so it's happened twice that was really, really poignant for me. One of them was a beach. So I was just beginning to wake up, but still kind of like, I think they call it the theta state at that state. It might be the theta state. So you're quite deep. And I realized that I was on this beach and it was sandy, and I knew that all of this was me creating it. But it was the thing that really was noted was the detail. So the water lapping up kind of and going back was exactly what a beach would be, all the ripples and everything, but it was me doing it. The sky was blue. I could feel the heat on the sand, and it was just kind of like the details of the rippling water. It was absolutely fantastic. And the other dream I had was kind of like a country house. It was like a big manor. It was green. There was kind of like bushes and everything. And again, I realized it was me that was doing it, but the detail was absolutely finite. You know, with your paintings and stuff, Neil, when you get down to the nitty gritty of the tiny little details, you're doing a statue, you know, in a garden, all of that was created. And I found it absolutely, and I woke up fascinated by it. I don't know if you guys have
because I've analysed it in, like you say, you're aware that you're dreaming and you're thinking, my God, I'm creating this. And I remember in one dream I became aware I was looking at things, and I was looking through someone's sketchbook at their drawings, and I was flicking through all their drawings, and I thought, I'm creating all these drawings as I'm looking at them. This is weird. And as I flick over the page, that drawing doesn't exist, and then as soon as the page is flipped over, there it is existing. It's so weird, isn't it?
Wow.
Have you had that kind of dreams of lucidity, Brandon?
Again, I have heard about all these really cool things. I have not experienced them. No, I am in zero control. I barely dream, to be honest with you. I don't know what that means. I just
they say you could be a clone if you don't have dreams.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Oh,
he's gonna sleep easy.
I didn't mean to cuss, guys. My bad. Well, bollocks then. That's
very English word there.
Because I've been, entertaining the idea of these NPCs a lot lately, and the simulation theory and stuff like that. Andy, have you gone down any of those rabbit holes of the non-playing characters running around here?
Oh yeah, so there's two aspects to this. So there's the grey kind of like meme image with the mouth, which is hilarious. And if you haven't seen it, go onto YouTube and look at NPC University. It just, I don't know what your feelings on wokes and progressives are, but I kind of like not really into that. But yeah, the NPC thing rips the shit out of that. And then, as you say, there's the reality, or kind of like this theory that there are some souls or some people that are acting like robots as part of a simulation. You could be right, and that's what's really scary. You could be right. You know, it's bizarre. It's just.
And one of the interesting ones is, think about how many times do you see your neighbors bring groceries in from their?
I've seen that meme. I've seen that. Yeah, you're right though.
Neil.
You're right.
When's the last time you saw your neighbors bring groceries in?
Yeah, try it. I mean,
I can't think.
They don't obviously eat.
That's the idea, right? Is that they're just NPCs or non-playing characters out here that have background stories that, you know, and maybe right when they walk inside from coming in, then the door shuts and then they just freeze, right? And they just stop there.
Yeah.
And there's no continuing of life because they're not necessarily alive. It's an interesting concept, and I've heard anywhere between the 7.5 billion people that we have on this planet, maybe 5 to 10% of them are actual players, actual people. Really
are you a fan of Bashar and Darryl Anka?
Not too. I'm not a fan of him. I've seen quite a lot of his stuff, and he's interesting. You know how he and it's cool. Yeah.
Hello, I say good day to you at this moment of your time. How are
there you go. He's definitely interesting, and he's very animated, and so I find, and of course, you know, wisdom's wisdom no matter where it comes from. And so I think that he does have a lot of interesting things to say, and a lot of things that anyone of any faith could apply that are pretty compelling.
Yeah,
I'm sure we've seen him bring the groceries in.
maybe not.
I'm quite a fan of Darryl Anka and Bashar. Again, it's one of those things where you kind of dip in and dip out. But one of Bashar's concepts, and I think I'm right in saying this, is that at any given moment in your life, the only people around you are those that exist within your reality, and all others don't exist. I know this kind of like it's just crazy, but imagine you're kind of like your eyes and your senses are kind of creating this reality around you, like a virtual reality thing. And if you have a friend in Australia and you call that friend in Australia, or you call us, you know, kind of like on webcam, we are in your reality at this moment, and we exist for you in this reality at this moment. But when you go off, you know, get down the pool hall or the snooker hall or something, or a music concert, and we're not there, we no longer exist in your reality. Right. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's really strange.
That's like the dream idea, is that you're facing the beach, looking at the sand and the sea, and all the people that are in your dream are behind you, and they don't exist until you turn around and face them. Like me turning the page of the book to suddenly see some drawings in it.
Yeah.
One of the things that they've said about, I did see this guy years ago who did a talk for us about dreams. He had studied them for years, and he said there's a couple of things you can't actually do in dreams. One of them is you can't switch the light on.
Yeah.
Don't know if you ever heard of that one.
Yeah, and you can't see your nose as well.
I don't know about that one. There was another one. But,
think about the last time you've had a dream.
You can't read a newspaper. You can't read a newspaper or anything with writing on. You start reading it, like today's headlines, the Titanic sunk, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And then you look at it again, and the words are in a different. It's not the same headline. It's changed.
Yeah.
There's never consistency with it.
Oh, there's a few other things actually. First of all, you can't see your nose, or you're not aware of your nose in a dream. Another thing I think is wind. You will not be aware of wind.
That's normally the thing that wakes me up.
Yeah. Brandon, I could see you were about to say something about the NPCs thing, and we sort of cut you off.
No. This is a conversation, man. You guys are great. This is fun. I'm having a blast. No, I mean, I have been thinking a lot about it, and just the idea of reality itself, and then just stripping it down, because what you said, Neil, is basically the fundamentals of quantum physics, right? The observer principle. Is Schrodinger's cat dead or alive? And the answer is yes, because unless you're observing it, it's just potentiality. It's just possibilities at that point, and that's on a quantum level. So science is married with the philosophy on this one, and I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. So I will say, though, to the NPC thing, and to Neil, what you said about nothing being visible in front of you unless you're seeing it with your own two eyes or observing it, because if we're following the either dream or simulated reality, then that is kind of getting more interwoven as well, and less defined and a little bit blurry between the lines of the defining those two concepts. With this idea that if you're viewing something with your own eyes or taking it in with your own, because everything you're sensing is just electrical impulses. So even this idea that you're just a brain in a vat somewhere being fed electrical impulses to specific parts of your brain, and then that's how you see, right? Because your vision, light, photons, when it comes through your eyes, is processed first. You don't actually see the reflection of it. Your frontal cortex processes the information, thinks about it a little bit, flips it back upside down or right side up, whatever. And then that's what you perceive is in that reality, and it happens in microseconds, but still that there's a time delay there. So in reality, everything you're seeing actually you're looking at things in the past every time you look at anything. Because it took light a certain amount of time to get to your eyes, it took your brain a certain amount of time to process it, and even though these are milliseconds worth of time, it is still something to where there is a scientific delay going on there. Now, to the point of NPCs in particular, these are people here to challenge, or to, the way you might look at it is that this reality is just tailored for you. It's an experience that you are having based on your desire to have that specific experience. And so if that is the case, then it is an interesting thing to think about, that what if, and this is an idea that I had recently that I brought up with a guy named Michael Wan on my show. Highly recommend that guy. He is fascinating. He does work on the Susquehanna mystery, and it's incredible. So anyway, the idea I had on the show is that maybe if this is a tailored experience that you are here to have for you as the observer, as the one experiencing all of this, maybe nothing happened before you were brought to this place, or your consciousness arrived in this physical body, and nothing happens after. All history is just told to you, right? Because you don't know things are the way that they are. You just, somebody came up with an idea and a story that said, okay, the earth is this old, this battle happened, dinosaurs were a thing. And maybe that's it though, but you're given these ideas and a set of parameters to kind of have a framework for reality, which appears very real, but even Einstein said reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. So I go down these deep thought experiments, man, way too often about this kind of stuff.
I'm exactly the same. It's like I've had the same thought about what if everything before is like it's not really real. It's exactly as you said, told to you. You come into this zone, whatever this place is, and then when you go, it makes my mind melt. It's fun and it's interesting. You could also write yourself out of existence as well. So the past physically has happened, so you're not experiencing it. So there's no such thing as the past. Okay, you're not experiencing the past. The future hasn't happened yet either. Okay, so the future isn't physically there because it hasn't happened yet. So that only leaves the now. And Neil Donald Walsh talks about the eternal moment of now, but every single moment that you say is now is immediately in the past. So it's like, if the past doesn't exist physically, if the future doesn't exist physically, and if the now is constantly the past, then what's left? And it's almost like you write yourself out of existence. Yeah, here we are.
It's interesting,
Yeah.
man. And then the concept that your past and that time is not linear, that it's just like a bunch of records stacked on top of each other, right? So every
Yes.
moment actually has either already happened, is about to, but it's all kind of written. So that takes away the idea of fate. But your ignorance of the future is why it can be whatever you want, but whatever potentiality it folds into has already happened, because you've already decided every moment of now, the eternal moment of now that you spoke of, and the things in the past kind of you can tell yourself now things that your past self can identify with and use as a guide. So if you think about the concept of spirit guides, maybe you are your own spirit guide. So your future knows what you're going to do, and if you're asking for help, it knows how to tell you to get there, which is the idea of collapsing that potentiality from you. So it's actually you in the future helping you in the past. Same thing with your past self from your present moment. You can forgive yourself as a little kid for things that you did or went through, or a moment that you had, and therefore you are your kid's spirit guide. It's an interesting concept, and it will melt your face off. It's pretty interesting.
It's a concept I've heard before, because I'm in the mediums kind of like circles of things. Yes, I've heard this before, that when you get to a certain level in mediumship with guides, you begin to realize, actually, I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah.
I've heard this more than one occasion.
And I've heard the way that you can delineate the voices in your head, because there's always two, right? You either say I'm doing a great job, or you're doing a great job. So whenever you say I'm, that's you having the thought. Whenever you hear you are doing a great job, that's somebody else, your spirit guide, your future self, higher source, whatever you want to put it, telling you or communicating with you in that way. So pay attention to if your thoughts start with I or you. Like you need to stop drinking, or you need to take a left here. Those kind of things, that maybe your spirit guide's talking to you. So just pay attention to the pronoun that they use before they start talking.
Have you ever attempted any channeling or trance work or anything like that at all?
No, I've taken a lot of mushrooms and it hadn't happened yet.
Are they growing in the background?
I got this book years ago in the late 80s called How to Reach Your Spirit Guides, and it was written by a lady called Catherine Riddle, and she had a PhD in psychology, so she's quite a very clever lady, and she'd gone to see people like these various spirit guide people, channelers and stuff, and she asked, how can I do this? And they taught her how to do it. So then she wrote a book on how to do it, and I followed the instructions to the letter, and it bloody well worked. It took quite a lot of practicing. You had to write like affirmations, maybe for a few weeks. I intend to meet my spirit guide, etc., etc. And then you had to do these mind exercises, and you'd visualize yourself as an empty vessel. And I didn't quite understand what it meant by an empty vessel. So the way I imagined it, that I imagined myself, I was a bit like a Toby jug with, say, a cup, but it had my face on the front, but inside it was empty. And that psychologically empty was to allow a spirit guide to then come in and take that over, either physically or psychologically speaking, to then come through me. And I started to do that, and I started to get some weird sensations in my stomach, like warmth. And I thought, oh, I don't remember this. So I thought, can I make that warmth move somewhere? And I started to make it move around my body. And then I could feel my Adam's apple moving, totally without my conscious intent on doing it. And then suddenly, and the only way I can describe it, it's like vomiting words. You cannot help but blurt it out. A bit like a compulsive speaking disorder suddenly became apparent. And I suddenly said, there seems to be some confusion with the process required. And I went, blah, my God, what's this? And it freaked me out. And so something was coming through me, I think, that was trying to correct my approach and trying to give me instructions on how to do it properly. And I did have more success with it later on. And that's when I ended up channeling that other weird spirit guide, Manico, because I didn't believe this spirit guide Manico existed. But then he came to me on a separate occasion and proved that he did exist by coming through me, because I thought it was this lady doing a funny, fuzzy bear voice, which I thought was really funny. Tell us all the jokes, And then it started coming through me maybe 2 weeks later, because I completely thought she was cookie and cranky, and I disbelieved her. And then it came through me and said, you were the one that asked the question, because I asked a question about Jesus to this spirit guide lady. So, yeah, it kind of works. Now, whether they're actually deceased people that once lived on Earth or spirits that are external to us, or just some psychological aspect operating through our mind, I don't know. It was an interesting idea. Maybe that's what Jane Roberts had, who wrote the Seth material. She always was in doubts. Was it a real thing or was it her? She, even to the point of her death in 1984, she still had those niggling doubts. Was it real or not? Even though it helped lots of people. Yeah.
An interesting one that I got a hold of a book recently was Outwitting the Devil. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah,
by Napoleon.
So what is it and what it's about?
Oh, Napoleon Hill. So it's actually from the 1938, and they actually took 72 years to release it. So he had to be dead, his wife had to be dead because there's a lot of controversial material in there. So basically, he's having a conversation with the devil, and I'm actually going to have maybe we could say this now, but we've got a future episode planned to where.
Oh, we've lost him. It's the devil.
Yeah, interesting.
Can you hear me now?
Oh. Yeah. Start again. Okay.
Oh, you're back. Yeah. Interesting timing, don't you think? Interesting.
It is interesting timing. So we're gonna do an episode about how we're gonna compare and contrast Conversations with God, of course, which is Neil Donald Walsh's interaction with God, and then Napoleon Hill's conversation with the devil, and they happened about 70 years apart, and so it's just really interesting.
Are you allowed to divulge what some of the conversations were about?
Well, we haven't had the episode yet, so we are gonna. But the book was written in 1938. It got released in 2011, I believe. But it's just really interesting. So the way that Napoleon Hill goes about convincing the devil, or commanding the devil rather, who insists on being called master the entire time. The devil does, by the way.
Yeah.
Your Majesty, I think is what he calls him. Yeah. And it's really interesting though. It's just a conversation between, and he talks about how he's able to acquire souls, and that 98 out of every 100 souls are already his. And it's just an interesting perspective on a conversation or a mediumship type of a thing, which kind of lends to the idea that you can't always trust what you're channeling or what's going on there, because we don't know. These levels are much higher than ours, and I know intuition will take you pretty far, but I would think something that's non-physical could be pretty compelling and convincing one way or another that it is whatever it says that it is.
Now you did speak to the lady who believed that she was channeling or communicating rather than channeling. I don't say that she actually brought him through, but she was in communication with the late Steve Jobs of the Apple Corporation, and I had put her in touch with you because I felt that her thing was more suited to your kind of show. What was your take on that? Did Steve Jobs come through in any way, shape, or form?
Kind of. So she was very interesting. So thank you for connecting us there, and very sweet. Her name is Stephanie Patel. She's a retired lawyer who actually has had a crazy life. A lot of it very traumatic, a lot of horrible things that I won't talk about on this show, but she explains on my show. And so she was incredibly sweet. Like I said, very interesting. She does a thing with a pendulum where basically she's got a piece of paper that's laid out. I don't know if you've ever seen this, and it's got a semicircle with all the letters of the alphabet on it.
Yeah.
And she holds a pendulum and asks questions, and then it will swing. Now, in her particular case, it just rotated one way or another. And so she would say that if she's getting the answer wrong, it would just stop. Now, in the middle of her explaining the process of this, I asked, and this is cold, we did not have this conversation at all. I just said, would it be rude or inappropriate for you to demonstrate that for us? In my experience, people who have something to hide about something that they're claiming don't want anything to do with the presentation of such things that can maybe be pointed out. She immediately said, yeah, I'll totally do it for you. And so she lowered her camera and did a little thing to where she claims contacted a spirit guide of mine personally. She just brought somebody through, said his name was Abraham, said that we've known each other for a long time. She has since sent me a few little audio recordings that she has sent me while channeling Abraham, my particular spirit entity, with some backstory about it. Apparently, I was a French nobleman who was supposed to be a mayor and then lost the race, which I don't see that happening. I'm very charismatic. I would have won that race. And I had like a cleft lip or something like that, and I couldn't communicate very well, which is ironic because in this life, my goal is to do a profession and an occupation where I communicate well. So it's pretty interesting, but she was really interesting, man. She told me about one exercise she did to where Steve would, and he talks to her all the time. Again, it is one of those, and I even said it in the intro, suspend your disbelief on this idea, because this is this lady's true story. This is how she feels about it. She's gotten a lot of really interesting information. one of the cool things that she talked about Steve Jobs in particular and why he was here to do what he did was his thing wasn't about, making money and all that on a cosmic level, on a spiritual level. His idea was to create technology that would connect people to raise the spirituality of the co-collective consciousness of the planet. And we do that through his devices. I'm having this interview on an iMac right now, and I've, of course, got my Mac phone. So in this way, we have all been able to connect way faster and covering much more distance than we could have had we have done it via horseback, let's say, for instance, or even just a car. It enables us to have conversations like what we're having, and then other people hear it, and then there's a way of kind of collectively raising the consciousness of the planet, and that was Steve Jobs' mission all along. Now, with Stephanie in particular, she talks about how their mission is to put the bite back in the apple and to wake people up to their true power as far as how it relates to Steve Jobs, because she woke up one morning and she just started decorating her house with Apple stuff. She can't explain it. And then she had some really interesting interactions where Steve Jobs said, put your car fob in your jacket pocket and then go lay down and take a nap. So she did that. And then he said, just lay here. And she was trying to astral project. He said then that he said, check your pocket. And she checked her pocket. The key was gone. Now the door was locked. She hadn't gone anywhere. The key somehow manifested itself down in the bowl where it does downstairs in a bowl by her front door down there. And she hadn't left it. She transmuted matter, she claims, down to another spot with the help of Steve Jobs and then her spirit family. She's got a group of entities that she communicates with, and Steve Jobs is one of them. And that's why I told her as well. I said, well, is it just famous people? Because she's got, I think, Thomas Jefferson. She remembers a past life with comedian. Miss Doubtfire. Come on, help me out, guys.
Oh, Robin Williams.
Thank you, Robin Williams. Okay. So she claims that she had a past life with him, and all of these contacts that she's had via the spirit world and who she is communicating with. It's interesting, man. She was very sweet. Like I said, she has a fascinating story, and she channeled a spirit guide of mine right there.
They call that, I mean, what you're describing where she had the key fob in a jacket and then disappearing, in the world of spiritualism, they call that apports. Now, normally, that's things where you're in a seance and things might drop through the ceiling. It can be flowers. Yeah, poltergeists kind of do it, but in a more controlled fashion. In a seance, they will call it apports, and it's more controlled with the spirit guides controlling what's happening. And they'll drop through flowers, sometimes old coins, old newspapers are a common thing as well. So the idea is, and sometimes there is jewelry. And on one occasion, they brought through this something from an Egyptian tomb. And the spirit guide was clear to point. It says it wasn't stolen. It's just that the person who it once belonged to 3,000 years ago is in their tomb. They don't have a need for it anymore. So I'm going to take it out of a tomb in Egypt from somewhere and bring it to you here. And it was analysed by someone to be a genuine ring of whatever, from Egypt.
I thought you were going to say it was the blue heart from Titanic that she dropped at the bottom of at the end of the movie.
That would be cool.
Call back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it's interesting too that exercise is called an apple because Steve Jobs asked her to do this thing. You created it.
Oh no, apport, A-P-O-R-T.
Apport.
Yeah, apport. It's I think it's from French. Apport means to move or transport, and that's where you get the word portal, which is the doorway through to somewhere. So it's all part of the same thing. Right, we're coming up to a break here, guys. So, we've been talking to Brandon Thomas of Expanding Reality. We've been covering Steve Jobs, Titanic, lucid dreaming. Who knows where we're going part 2. But stay tuned with us on the Paranormal Peep Show. We'll see you in a minute.
Today's the best day of my life. Woohoo! Listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Hi, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, Andy Chaplin, and Brandon Thomas of Expanding Reality Podcast. Welcome back, Brandon, and thank you for joining us for part 2. So we've been discussing all sorts of weird stuff, and one of the things I wanted to come back on was Schrodinger's cat that you talked about earlier. Now, I understand that, but for the benefit of those that don't know what Schrodinger's cat is, it's not a cartoon series. It's not your little moggy that you feed every night. What is it?
So Professor Schrodinger was a philosopher and I think he was dabbling in quantum physics. And so what his idea is that it's an example. No cats were harmed in the making of this example. So the example is that it referred back to whenever you view something in quantum physics or in reality, it collapses the wave, and the wave that's referred to is the wave of potentiality, right? And so whenever Schrodinger visualized this experiment, it was basically taking a cat and putting it in a box. And then there was a little hammer with a vial of poison. And basically on the outside, you could pull the lever and it would break the vial of poison. The cat would die, right? So the question is when the cat was in the box, the experiment wasn't running, but when the cat was in the box, that was the experiment. Okay, so the thought experiment that led him to think this is the cat dead or alive in the box? Because you can't see it, right? You're not visually looking at it. So you can't verify that it is alive or dead. The potentials are one of each. So therefore the answer is yes, because if you're not observing it, you're not collapsing the wave of potentialities, which in this example is dead or alive. And so therefore it exists in both of these states until an observer views it. It's kind of like the double slit experiment also done in quantum physics. They figured out that they could shoot particles at two slits in a piece of paper or a panel, and then on the back wall they would appear in two slit forms. Well, whenever they ran the experiment again, they actually appeared as an interference pattern, like a wave. So they were doing the experiment the same exact way, but it appeared in the result was two different things. So is it a particle or a wave? The answer, of course, is yes, because the potentials exist. Infinite potentials exist all the time. It takes you observing them to determine what they are. So that's all. It's just about potentiality. But if you scale that up, then your entire reality can be viewed that way as well.
And Andy brought his own Schrodinger's cat in there for those that were watching.
Well, that came out, but my little Jessie is to the side of me.
Your cat was partly there and partly not, so I think that illustrates the point quite well.
And what's interesting is on my side, Andy's frozen, and so I didn't see the cat at all. So the answer is, did we see the cat or not? The answer is
see the cat or not?
He's going to bring it back just for. Oh, there he is. Andy's now shown his cat, but because of the green screen, he kind of fades in and out of reality himself.
It's still frozen on my end. So this is what's interesting. We're proving it now. The cat is there in y'all's reality. It is not there in mine.
Yeah.
The answer
and I bet the cat, in his own little way, is cursing this idea of Schrodinger because he's getting taken off this nice little cozy cushion.
She heard vial of poison, and then she's out.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. We talk about the fact that if you see those things, but what about blind people? Because obviously they're interacting in our reality, but they can't collapse waves with their eyesight. So what are they doing? I wonder.
This is a fantastic question, because observer principle, I don't think specifically refers just strictly to vision. I would think that it would refer to just an interpretation by your senses that something is changing in your environment. So I would think if they hear something, maybe that then to them, that's a car driving by. Well, then boom, a car drives by, right? Now, maybe for blind people, the simulation doesn't have to work as hard, right? Maybe for blind people, they chose to have the experience of their video card not working in their simulation. And so therefore, they get this data input of all sorts of other things. It's kind of a trade-off. And this is the interesting idea about the simulation theory anyway, would be that it's just possible that if this is a simulation, you kind of have to entertain that thought before you go further with it. So if it is, and we can go that far, then it could be possible that what you're experiencing here is something that even down to the level of that you put a quarter in a machine at a fair, and now you're at a carnival. This is just a ride. This whole experience that you're having is just a ride from a different entity in a different place, dimension, whatever, that is just having an experience that it tailored for itself. It's okay. I want to be blind. I want to live in this country. I want to, have this happen to me at 20 years old, and that introduced me to this person. It could get that detailed. So like while you're in line waiting for your turn to put your quarter in and have the simulation, they hand out a questionnaire to everybody, and it's just got questions on it. Okay, do you want to be a cat? Do you want to be a dog? Do you want to be a flower? The mind goes nuts on those kind of ideas, especially if you just consider the fact that if it is a simulation, then you could do anything. And if you are an entity, it's experiencing itself subjectively on a large level. So your God just split apart into many different pieces, experiencing itself in this way, then you do it in infinite ways. So to that idea, then I'm Neil, you're Andy, we're all each other in separate pieces of consciousness, just having this experience here together with ourselves.
That's melted me. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, no, I get it, and I'm along the same lines. And I would add to that when we're talking about things like psychics predicting the future, I think what they're doing, they're not predicting a concrete version of reality. They are predicting the most probable reality given current circumstances or current intentions.
Like weather reports.
Why, where some people, when they're given predictions for the future, they can either go in that direction or they cannot go in that direction. For instance, if a psychic says to somebody, I'm seeing a speeding ticket, you might want to slow down. Okay, there's two potentialities. One potential could be they really like speeding, they're not going to listen, they're going to carry on going, and they're going to get a speeding ticket. Or they will listen to the prediction and say, okay, maybe I should slow down. And then they're actually recreating or rejigging their reality where they would have got a speeding ticket and now they're not because they're going to slow down a little bit.
It's like in the Matrix, whenever she goes to visit the Oracle and she says, don't worry about the vase.
Exactly.
Turns around and then breaks a vase. But that's the question she asks inevitably is, he said, well, how did you know? And she says, well, what's really going to cook your noodle is, would you have still broken it if I hadn't said anything? So it's like one precedes the other. Yeah.
It helps your mind, because what if both are true at the same time? This is
in the many worlds theory, which is what Schrodinger's cat comes from. All those things are true, aren't they? Because Schrodinger's cat, as you explained, is the cat alive or dead, and that's how the many worlds theory kind of came out of that whole thing. And for the many worlds theory, I'll just explain that for people. It's a quantum physics kind of thing. Some people call it the many universes theory, and the idea is that each person operates in their own world, and then basically whatever decision you make, for instance, do you go to Starbucks or do you go to another coffee shop on a particular day? You decide, because they're doing a special offer, you can get 2 drinks for one at Starbucks, and you go down that road. Then you meet a person that gives you $1,000 because they're just feeling generous, and your life goes on a different tangent. Whereas on the other reality, you go off into another world and you don't get $1,000 and things go wrong. I mean, there's a really good they covered that in Red Dwarf once, where is it Rimmer? Who's the one that's kind of like with the H on his thing?
Yeah, that's
Rimmer, where in one reality something changed in his childhood, where he became a super kind of starfighter, Buck Rogers space hero. But in the one that we were used to in Red Dwarf, he was this nerdy guy who really thought he was the bee's knees, but he wasn't. He was a real low-down scum of the earth kind of vending machine repair guy on a spaceship. And in the show, they actually met each other or something from different realities, which is quite a clever take on the whole thing. So out there's a better version of us in another universe doing things, and there's also a worse version of us. But the idea is that we're going through these realities the whole time anyway, but we don't notice, and it's really mind-numbing.
How do we know that when we wake up in the morning, we're waking up in the same world that we went to sleep in?
I actually had an experience once where I woke up, and I couldn't remember my name. I couldn't remember who was in the bed next to me. I mean, it sounds like a Friday night, doesn't it? But I hadn't been drinking, but I just woke up and think, who the hell? And for about 5 or 6, maybe 20 seconds, I really had a problem getting my memory together. And eventually it all kind of clicked in place, and I was suddenly, oh yeah, it's me. But it's just really as if I wasn't in my body or something. It's a really peculiar thing. It could have been something biological, maybe. I don't know. But it's just so bizarre that, like what you say, are we waking up as the same person that was yesterday's story? There seems to be a continuity about it, but all the time we are splitting off, according to the many unit, we are splitting off and subdividing, and there's many versions of us going off, and we don't know who the original is. We could, and that's where we get into clones, because we were talking about clones earlier.
So can I expand on this a little
bit? Yeah, go for it.
So one of the ideas is then, if many worlds, as you have set up, is the way that it is, and there's an infinite number of yous out there that are having every experience known to any entity at all. This is a very tricky one to wrap your head around. If you thought your face melted before, just hang on. So if you are in all of these potentialities, right, because that's what they are, your consciousness is just focused into one of them from your perspective. Now, your consciousness, of course, is just a split of all things that are consciousness. Therefore, you are all of them at the same time, and you can flip between the lives or the realities. So I've been playing a lot lately, especially over the past few months, of manifesting my reality and playing with the idea of existence and reality and what that really means and the boundaries of it, right? So I heard this idea that I implemented, like I said, a few months ago now, and it has been
Oh, we cut out. It's always the best moments, isn't it? It's always
Am I back?
Okay, come back
Am I
again.
back?
Right,
No.
yeah, it was just at the best moment.
Oh, okay.
We got to the climax and it cut.
Sounds like anyway. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Then where did I leave off? And you want me to just snap this or?
You're saying you've been trying some procedure, exercise the
Playing
last
with
few months,
reality,
and
manipulating
it's
reality.
just starting to bear fruition. That's kind of thing where you're going with it.
Got you. So yes, this exercise that I've been playing with my reality has to do with stepping into the shower in the morning rather than unconsciously waking up from a dream and not having real control over it in that instance, right? Because so in your example, Andy, you woke up in the morning and now you're not in the same reality, but you weren't necessarily choosing it from a conscious level.
Mm.
Let's say that you were able to choose it from a conscious level.
Okay.
So going back to the idea that only what you see is your reality, okay? Whenever you step into the shower and you close that door, you shut that curtain, that little area that you are in, that is all you can perceive of your reality, or even in the bathroom as a whole. Let's extend it to just the bathroom. Okay.
Yeah.
So if that is your reality and that's all you can perceive and interact with, you don't know what the reality outside of that looks like. You have an idea of what, whenever you step out of that shower or you open that door, what that reality will look like, but you don't really know for sure. So in this exercise, what you do and what I've been doing is in the morning when you take your shower, shut the curtain. Now you're in what I call my portal. This is my portal. This is how I transmute different realities, different potentialities of existence on the infinite realities that I exist in, individualistic expressions of in these infinite realities. Okay. So what you do is that you decide where you want to go when you step into the portal. You say goodbye to the world before you get in there. You shut that curtain because the reality you step out into is one of these other versions of you. It's just a version that you choose. Now, if you want to step out into the reality of you that's in prison for murdering people, okay, then there you go. And eventually maybe you'll murder somebody and then you'll be thrown in prison. So that comes true. Or you can step out into a world where your dreams are more realized, where the aches and pains, the troubling relationships, the obstacles that are seemingly holding you back from doing what you really want to do don't exist anymore. And if you really consciously practice this, I can tell you from experience, it works. I have shifted reality every day into a more conducive, far greater reality to set me up for more happiness, where my goals are achieved, where I'm more abundant, and I have a lot more fun with it. It has worked out. The very first day that I did this was when I got a email correspondence back from Neil Donald Walsh's I guess agent saying that he would love to come on the show the first day. And this is a big thing. So that's when I was like, okay, this is working out for me. So just try it. I encourage you guys to try this.
And funnily enough, this is exactly I mentioned before Bashar and Darryl Anka. This is exactly what Bashar's talking about. He can't emphasize enough. We create our own reality, and it sounds like a throwaway kind of Chinese Christmas cracker fortune cooker type thing, but it's not. It's that we do. Now, I want to actually jump back to something you mentioned before, Brandon, about the fact that there are dark forces who know how powerful we are, and they will insert little fear-based realities, COVID, to really screw with mankind and keep us kind of under the lid and under control so their system can prevail.
There are a few examples and ideas on this, and yes. So one of them would be, for instance, the people who tell you that you can create your own reality, and they tell you that it's bollocks, that it's nonsense, that you can't actually do that, and they convince you of it. Those people right there are the ones that you need to stop listening to and paying attention to. Those are what Stephen Pressfield calls the resistance, right? And so the resistance is anything that holds you back from your dreams or realizing your reality. Now, in a simulated reality, you would want those there for continuity, as far as you need an enemy, you need an adversary. Pat Mahan on my show talked about that at the end of a play, both the villain and the hero bow at the same time and then exit stage, right? Because you need both to have a story. So I've lately been viewing, after I read Stephen Pressfield's book called The War of Art. It's not very long at all, but it's very, very powerful. He's just a fiction writer that wrote this book in reference to choosing your own reality, or specifically choosing creative arts, an artist, an actor, a podcaster, a musician, anything like that. When you choose a field or an occupation to where you're going to leave the system or the matrix, whatever you want to call it, and then jump to a more where you are in the driver's seat type of reality, and especially if you're doing something that benefits humanity in a creative way. And then there's this idea of these dark forces called the resistance, and they're persistent, man, and they play dirty. And so this will be anything like your unsupportive family, like society telling you that what you're doing or what you enjoy is crap, and even down to your spouse, down to all sorts of little things that are playing a role in your reality to feed back to you that which you really want. So they're part of the resistance, all these things that aren't encouraging you to move forward, all these things that aren't helping you in ways that are surprising. So yeah, it's this idea of these dark forces. And of course, if they know how you do it, now you can get into an energy extraction prison planet type of an idea where we're on this prison planet. Energetic beings know how to keep us in fear. It's a nod to adrenochrome, which is a horrible practice. And so basically, instead of the physical adrenochrome that they extract from children, it's a horrible concept. Then basically from all of humanity and any entity, actually, they extract what's called loosh, or your energy.
Yeah.
And that's what they feed on. And it tastes the best when seasoned with fear, is the way that I'll put it.
Interestingly, I went on a walk today, and I sometimes get very kind of into meditative kind of like thought processes, things when I'm on my walk. I'm in nature and I go deep within myself. And everything that you just said was literally the topic of conversation in my own mind about honestly, about the adversary thing, and going back to Neil Donald Walsh's thing about there are some good guys that are playing the bad guys to give context. Because if there's no contrast, then how can love know what love is without the darkness? That's literally what I was thinking about on my walk today. Bizarre.
We live in a dualistic reality, man, and that's what this three-dimensional reality, or that's what this game that you put the quarter in to have. We have dark light, we have hot cold, we have good bad, we have all of these things to choose from, right? And you're just here to choose an experience. And my understanding of the research that I've done, and what resonates with me the most, is that it's all just a ride. You're just here to touch, smell, taste, see, and hear everything that you can before your time is up, or before before it's the next person in line turn to ride, or whatever. It's just an interesting concept, man, and it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. It's kind of just follow your intuition and live life the way that you want to. There's no real such things as right or wrong in this existence. There is only what serves you and what doesn't serve you. For some people, being horrible and eugenics and murdering and all of those serves those people just fine, because they've got ends, they've got ideas, they've got goals that they want to implement, and that's the way in which they do it. Now, I don't think either of us three resonate at that frequency.
No.
Ours is a different path, and so we are, though, confronted by these things in our reality to know that which we are not. Again, back to the dualistic nature of our existence. You have to know dark so that you know light. You have to know soft so that you know hard. You have to know good so you know bad. You have to know what serves you by knowing what does not serve you. And these things change all the time, which is interesting. It's a very fluid dynamic. If we're talking specifically about what's going on now in the world, it seems at present that it's the boss level. If this is, a game, that they're just throwing it all at you. And it's really interesting. I think what happens forward with the UFO disclosure movement is going to be something everybody needs to pay attention to, because I've got very different thoughts on that whole concept in general.
What expand on that?
So everybody's pretty excited that the U.S. government is telling us something that we've all known for a very, very long time, and that is that aliens are real, that UFOs are here, and all of that. Now, something I was talking to a good friend of mine, Robbie Graham, about, because we were both skeptical of this release, or this newfound disclosure movement, is you're not hearing it from philosophers or people like us. You're hearing it from the media, who's been lying to you forever. You're also hearing about it from government officials through a military mindset. So if you'll notice, I don't know if you guys saw the 60 Minutes little segment that got released the other night, but it has Fravor, it's got his co-pilot, it's got Luis Elizondo, Christopher Mellon. It's these people in government that actually have more of a tie to the CIA and to the military. Those are the people that are headlining this release. Okay, and we know that in past that is the same exact government that lies to you about everything. There's a laundry list of examples that we could use on why you can have trust issues with your government and be completely justified in doing so. I'm skeptical that it's going to be another contrived way, sort of like the other things going on, to strip you of your liberties, to round you up, and to put this fear in you of an alien threat, because that's how they
Mhm.
keep phrasing it. If you pay attention to the wording that they're using, the verbiage is alien threat. We got to make sure they're not a threat. They could pose a threat. I mean, just listen now that you've heard this. Listen to the way that they present this information. These things far exceed our technology, and therefore one could be led to the conclusion that they're a threat. Now, in my mind, and in y'all's mind probably, if they wanted to destroy all of humanity, they could have done it any moment. So
Yeah.
why is the government just now telling us this? Why are they just now telling us that it's a threat? And then, again, lending to the idea that they could have done anything they want at any time. In my mind, it's just another tool. It's another tool in the toolbox to instill fear and whatever kind of agenda that they've got. It's not going to be good.
It's interesting because of all the times in the past when someone's questioned the Ministry of Defence, which is our Department of Defence here in the UK, about a UFO sighting, and they don't really want to comment on it, but they'll just say we looked at it and there's no defence threat, or there's no defence significance, etc., etc. In other words, oh, well, if it hasn't invaded us, we're not interested, type of thing. So, well, don't you really want to know what it's about? Don't you want to go further than that? It may not be a threat on this particular day, but it could be they're doing a recce on you, and it could be a threat the following week. But that was always the line they gave us. It was no defense significance at all. So now that angle's changing, and they're going to go to it could be a threat. You might have to have a little jab to protect you from their viruses from another planet.
I wouldn't be surprised if it went in that direction. Brandon, have you heard about the Werner von Braun deathbed confessions?
I was about to bring that up. Yes. So that one was very interesting, because that is another thing Robbie and I talked about recently, about that. Yes, there were 3 different scenarios. One was terrorist, one was an asteroid threat, and one was an alien threat as well.
There was a Rogue Nation, Rogue Nation one as well. And then he said his words were, the last card that they will play will be the ET card.
Yep. I have heard this, and this is another reason I've come to the conclusions that I have about the narrative that's going to be spun with this. And again, we can look at these entities, these craft, and know that they're not a threat. And if they were, they would have already done it by now. The other thing, though, Neil, to your point, is that yes, that narrative was interesting on 2 points, because number one, they didn't find it a threat, so therefore they didn't investigate it, which splinters off into number one, how do you know it's not a threat? Which means that they probably know a lot more about it than they're telling anyone, right? It doesn't mean that they're not going to investigate it because it's not a threat. It means that it's old news. They've already been there, done that. They don't need to, go down that path anymore. They're just maybe pacifying the public. But then you look at all the deep underground military bases and stuff like that. It's like, why are they building all that? And then that leads you to Project Bluebeam, which is fascinating in my mind. That's one of my favorite conspiracy theories, because it is so extravagant. It is just very over the top. But yeah, this is interesting times, man. This is definitely interesting times.
What is a Bluebeam? Oh, sorry.
The blue beam, in short, is a fake alien invasion as an excuse.
This is the same thing you were just okay.
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. It involves holograms, breaking down the religions of the world. It involves fake staged direct energy weapon earthquakes that reveal ancient texts that have never been seen by humankind, but that predate all other biblical texts. And then it brings them all to one world religion, saying, hey guys, no offense, it's not your fault, we were wrong. Turns out it's just one God that rules over all of them. Project Bluebeam, the hologram element, again, it will shoot then in, I don't know, the Middle East. It'll have Muhammad, it'll have Jesus over here, and maybe in the UK, it'll then have Buddha over in the Asian countries, and Krishna in India. And then all of these then will appear in the sky over. They'll have sky to skull technology, where they can then beam in any language a common message for all of humanity around the world. I'm telling you, this is amazing. This is why it's one of my favorites. And then all of those entities will then appear in the sky of everybody, merge into one entity seemingly, and then tell everyone, hey guys, no big deal. I'm the true God. It's all going to work out. You guys were just wrong, but don't feel bad about it. There's a certain amount of chaos that will happen on the planet as a result of that one thing. The other element to this is they can beam voices and things into your TV, into your phone, into your toaster, everywhere. You'll hear this common message between everything. That's not all of it. Then aliens come in via a fake alien invasion, via a combination of holograms, as well as reverse engineered technology that the governments have already that will appear fantastical because they made them. And then Sky Jesus will come in and battle the aliens, ushering in a new world order, one world government, and that's it. That's why it's one of my favorites, because it's so batshit crazy.
Now, I would say that it sounds batshit crazy, but given the past 2 years, it's pretty damn plausible. You know what I mean?
I'm with you. And I heard this recently too, that somebody was like, oh, the government's, aliens are real. And the guy was like, okay, yeah. They're like, no, we just told you aliens are real. And he's like, yeah, my tolerance for hearing crazy stuff and it blowing my mind is pretty stripped out. And he was like, so that's interesting. And so it is, and it refers you back to, those lines in movies where like, it's just crazy enough it might work. Right. And so maybe that's it. It's just so damn crazy that they might pull it off. It's interesting. It's fun. That one's fun.
Here's a question for you, Brandon. In the UK, in mainstream media, not just woo-woo media, but mainstream media, I saw a report saying, get ready, your mobile phone, everybody's mobile phone could have an emergency broadcast alert terror signal. It could be screaming like an alarm, an alert. And that was in a mainstream newspaper. Have you got that kind of thing set up in America, or have the media warned you that your phone could be used to alert you on terrorism?
Fortunately, I have that particular feature turned off on my phone, and I don't watch the news, so I'm completely oblivious to all their bullshit. So it's nice.
Yeah.
It would be called Steve Jobs alert from the spirit.
Well, what it seemed to be like, this particular article, what it seemed to be like is that it will override everything that your phone is doing and give you an alert whether you want it or not. That seems to be the vibe of it.
It doesn't surprise me. I think also, but it's like your other, all these Bond villains that are running around. It's just to push the narrative of fear. I think that what's really interesting about like the resistance, about this kind of stuff, it doesn't affect me. I have been 0% affected by this stuff negatively because I don't vibrate at that frequency. There's an interesting concept of ascension that is going on right now. Basically, that we're a 3D reality where everything is negative and down and being affected negatively by what their environment because they're choosing to let it. And then there's a 5D reality. Apparently, we just want to skip over 4. There's bad stuff going on there, so we're just going to transcend it and go to 5, shoots and ladder style. So, but that we exist on a planet where there's 2 different realities existing here simultaneously, and I have found that I'm much more 5D. Like I said, the fear, all of that stuff doesn't get to me. I'm not scared of the jab because I'm not going to get it. I'm not scared of the all those other things because I don't vibrate at that frequency. I just don't, and so therefore I'm basically immune to it. It's like my own immunity to bullshit, So.
Yeah. It is what you're talking about. Also, the movie thing that you start to do with your colleagues, where the idea is that you're just going to take films and discuss how far in our reality of those films, like you talked about Jurassic Park and cloning and Close Encounters. Are we any closer to the aliens? Can you talk about that a little bit? That was an interesting idea that you've got going there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Darcy Weir, who's a filmmaker. He a great guy, good friend of mine. I've had him on the show, and therefore we just became really good friends over me reaching out to have him on the show. He's been on twice. Once we talked with Stephen Bassett about disclosure. The other one was with Gary King about crop circles, and that was a fascinating episode as well. So Darcy had the idea. He called me and said, hey, I've got an idea for a show where we review movies, but we take the fictional stuff and we revert it to real life. And we've got some really cool ideas coming up. Some of them I won't talk about because we haven't done them yet. The show is called the Esoteric Review. And we are doing movies, books, TV shows, like a lot of Black Mirror stuff, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of paranormal, ghost stuff. And that will be coming out very soon. I think we launch our first show. I think we're going to put 3 out at once at the end of June is kind of our plan. So we just recorded the first one with Robbie Graham of Silver Screen Saucers. We did that last night, and it was great. We did, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Robbie wrote an entire chapter in his book, Silver Screen Saucers, about it. So, of course, I wanted to have him on. He knows a lot of the backstory about how NASA wrote to Steven Spielberg and told him not to make the movie for fear of public hysteria. And it's an interesting concept. We talked a lot about it, and then we get into some other concepts as well. It's a great show. It's a great idea. It's not my idea. I'm just part of it.
It's interesting because with the idea of silver screen saucers, flying saucers generally, is prior to that we have discussed this on the show with other people. There were sightings of what they call phantom airships in the 1800s in America and possibly parts of Europe, where these mysterious airships would land with people on them, strangers asking for weird things like, can we have some of that water, or can you give us some bluestone or whatever bluestone is? And these ships seem to have a kind of an airship look about them, but they've got superpowers in the sense that they can take off at super speeds and things, which sound very much like today's flying saucers. And then these craft of there we go then. Yeah, that's the sort of Jules Verne-ish sort of stuff.
Yes. So this is a book called The Secrets of Delshow, and it is by Dennis Crenshaw. This book details what was his name? Charles A. Delshow, and he had a bunch of drawings that he made of different airships. I don't know. Can you guys see that?
No, you have to bring it back a bit. It's flaring a little
bring
bit.
it back a little bit.
Mind you, it's too small then.
Okay. Just about. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, he's got all of these dirigibles as you're talking about, and the idea and the concept is of the Sonora Aero Club. And this was in Sonora, California. The story of how these drawings were come into possession was fascinating. They were actually thrown away. They were in a dumpster, and now some of them sell for about $25,000 a page.
Wow.
But the concept of this was a very old one. Some people will relate it to the current secret space program, and that there was a breakaway civilization that was much higher in technology existing among us. Again, the 3D versus the 5D. There were two different realities living here, and yeah, there's some fascinating accounts of that happening in, yes, the late 1800s. I think 1896, 1897, somewhere in there.
It's almost like that movie, The Wild Wild West, where they had that steampunky machinery technology at that time, the Jules Verne looking stuff, which was quite fascinating. But the saucers developed along with a parallel path of our own technology. So as we start to get more streamlined motor cars with aerodynamic ailerons coming off them or whatever, the 50s and 60s, so these balloons or whatever they were started to become almost like streamlined silver saucers to reflect the change in our own technology. And now we're not really seeing flying saucers. Well, there might be still flying saucers, but we're now seeing tic-tac things, and thinking, what's going on there? So are the aliens just souping up their technology anyway? That's their own natural evolution of technology, or are they doing something, or are we creating it as well? This is where it blows my mind.
This is an interesting one because yes, people have been reporting, and it goes back even further. And this is the one thing about the phenomenon, right? The idea is that it stays just one step out of our ability to create it. So we can conceptualize these things. We can't create them, right? A flying craft without wings, we can't create that, but we can see it. We can understand it. Okay, it's going to do that. Which really interesting is this goes really far back in history as well. There were reports of like bowls coming down, and that's just the way that they described them. But the Vikings also described ships in the sky, but they were wooden ships that had no plumes or exhaust or anything like that. So they were kind of again, they could understand it. They could conceptualize it. They couldn't do it. They couldn't physically achieve it. So they were like wooden ships from their point of view flying around. And so, yes, it stays one step out of what they can do, because they can create wooden ships, but they couldn't make them fly, right? And so same with us. We can have airplanes, but we could make silver discs with no wings, no aft rudders, no anything like that, no visible exhaust. We can't make that fly. And yes, the saucers seem to go away when we started to really venture out into space travel, because now it's stepped its game up into a different part. Now, the really interesting thing is what you said, Neil. Is it just that the technology on their end is progressing at this rate, which is interesting, that it progresses at damn near the same rate that we do on its own scale, right? It just had a head start, if you will. Or is it a psychosemantic or a projection from our own mind, creating these tulpas or these aliens or these thought forms? Or is it something that the Earth produces? We don't know.
So the typical kind of 1950s saucer, like the rickety kind of like wobbly one in the B movies of the 1950s, was that taken from people's accounts of flying saucers, say in the 1940s and 30s? Where's that coming from?
What was interesting about that is that when they started doing that, they were based on some sort of an idea of that. But even the Kenneth Arnold sighting in 47 was they were more like delta wings. They weren't saucers, like round discs, right? But the term flying saucer came from that experience, because somebody that he reverted the story to, because he did a lot of press afterwards, is that he described it, and then they wrote in the newspaper that it appeared to be like saucers skipping across the water. That's where we get the term flying saucer from. But whenever they started appearing like that in the 1950s in film, yeah, some of them were based off of that. But if you look at like the Lonnie Zamora case, which happened in the 60s, that was an egg. Every shape you can think of has been a UFO. This is another interesting idea that it's created by us, right? Even on this subconscious level, that it's something that we are co-collectively manifesting, because sometimes, and some UFO reports have been a group of about 10 people, 3 will see it, the others will not. A group of 2 people, 1 will see it, 1 will not. So there's an interesting element of it's kind of messing with us, I had a guy named Paul Askoff on the show. Have you guys ever heard of him?
Name rings a bell. Sounds
He wrote
familiar.
a book, UFOs, The Real Story, and it is fascinating. He ties all of this together. I interviewed him for my show. Highly recommend him and his book. He says that it's interdimensional or electrostatic beings, right? And that there's different dimensions, different levels. It's the dimension idea, but the way that he explained it was so fascinating, because it explains UFOs, entities, time slips, time travel, Bigfoot, paranormal, all of it. It ties it all together into one concept or idea. And I loved the idea.
I'm fully on board with that. Like in the kind of like the paranormal community, going back say 10, 20, 30 years, you've got the UFO lot over here, and you've got the ghost lot over here, and you've got the demonologists over here, and you've got the angel people over here. More and more as the years go on, I'm really kind of putting them all together and saying what we're talking about is dimensions here, and we're talking about conscious entities here.
That's it. And when you stop battling with each other, especially within the community, then because all of it's associated, right? It's all ancillary phenomena. Even Jacques Vallée would write about how, whenever you're reporting on UFOs, make sure that you report if anything strange happened in your home, poltergeist activity. Did you get a ring on the phone and no one was there? Did you get the knock on the door and no one was there? And then you saw a UFO. All of it's connected. It's all connected somehow.
Zamora case was interesting in some respects. He was the police officer that was chasing a car, decided that he saw something in the sky or some smoke, or he thought a plane had crashed, and so he just abandoned the car chase, went over the hills to have a look at this thing. Like I say, he saw this egg-shaped craft with some people. He thought they were kids, and he was going to offer help or something, and they ran back in the ship, but it took off with a flame, like a rocket, which is like, that don't sound like super high technology, not anti-gravity. It's more like, liquid fuel that Apollo rockets use or something, Saturn V's and stuff, which was a bit strange. But they did have people come out and they did identify that there were prints and burnt rocks and things where there was a physical trace of something being there. So it kind of proved that something was there. But it's a weird thing, because like you say, some people can see it, some people aren't. Is it all in the head? But that appeared to be a physical thing. But what disturbs me a little bit is the fact that this took off with rocket technology. So was it there to throw a bit of a diversion on the flying saucer thing? Is it NASA deliberately putting these things out there or the CIA or someone putting these things out there, but they haven't quite got the UFO technology, so they have to make something with the rocket thing? I don't know. It's just a weird thing to have, I don't know. I mean, what's your take on it?
And even in the Zamora case, yes, it did. A jet blue flame shot up. It rose up out of the sky. It had landing gear that it retracted, and then it went completely silent and then flew off. So it didn't need the rocket except for ascent. Now, what's interesting about the rocket in general is, yes, it did char and burn some things around the area, but it didn't cut a hole or disturb the area in a way that a rocket would, right? It didn't disturb the ground in typical rocket style, which leads you to 2 conclusions. Number one, it's a really cool rocket, and we have no idea what the hell's going on with it, but it kind of phased through the ground to then propel up. So if you picture ground, then it went through the ground, but didn't leave a hole or anything. It just kind of, I don't know, interacted with it as if it was a glitch in the matrix, if you will, and then kicked on some sort of gravity amplifier or dampener, and then just shot off with no sound and no noise whatsoever. No heat, no visible plumes or anything. The only plume was the one that got it off the ground. So if that's the case, now you can think of other UFOs that have been flying along and people have seen them turn into jetliners. They turn into commercial aircraft before their eyes. So there is kind of a shape-shifting skinwalker element to them as well, which leads to the idea that they're conscious, they're entities themselves. All of these things are on the table. It could be our government. We don't know, man. It's all interesting.
Yeah,
great.
I've heard this thing about the shape-shifting thing. I want to bring back in the helicopters concept, because I've heard that people who get the black helicopters, they've said that orbs of light kind of like have turned into helicopters and then back again.
Yep.
And it could be the Zamora UFO with the egg flame
It could be.
coming
There
out.
was writing on the side of it. There was
Yeah.
like an upside down A or an upside down V, which is just an A, and then like 2 lines or whatever in red writing about 3 foot by 3 foot. So
They did translate it. It says, "Get your fresh eggs at this farm."
we'd like to contact you about your car's
Yeah.
extended warranty.
Yeah, but no, I mean that blue flame. It could have been like a beam.
Yeah.
It could have been a beam of that supports the weight of the ship or something.
Yeah, he like Zamora could have misinterpreted. Like it could have
Yeah.
appeared to him as if it was a flame, but maybe
That's
it wasn't. Maybe it just looked like a flame, but it wasn't.
Yeah, that's a bit like the Flatwoods Monster, which was again a craft that had come down in the Flatwoods areas, Virginia, I think it was, and this mother and her kids and a few friends ran up to where they thought it had crashed, and they were looking at this thing glowing, and then someone spotted something up in a tree virtually above them, and it had like these red glowing eyes, and she described it as what looked like a lower section, like pleats on a curtain. Now, because she was a lady, she would be familiar with the term of pleats and stitching and sewing. 1950s lady we're talking about, so it's not being sexist, it's just the way that she was.
Yeah, just
So when it was drawn, literally they drew it about 10 minutes before they went on this TV show to, they say, okay, what did you see? And they spoke to the TV commercial artist who drew it. And so she described the lower section like pleats on a curtain. So he drew a dress, which, and for years, everyone kept seeing this UFO lady or man or whatever it was, alien, that appeared to be wearing a dress. And it was just so bloody stupid and crazy. I mean, it's only when this guy looked into it that it was a mistake on part of the artist that had drawn it wrongly. And really, it was more like piping or something that was on this creature, this robotic hovering thing, whatever it was. Very interesting case, though, the Flatwoods Monster, as it's known as.
Yeah.
So what is your favourite UFO case, Brandon?
I'm a big fan of the Pascagoula is fascinating. I think that honestly, in the States here with the Aurora case in Texas, which is really cool, it's just right down the street. But I want to say the Phoenix Lights was really, really interesting because that was one of the first ones that was really televised and publicized worldwide. And especially with the governor having seen it with his own eyes, had a fake press conference that then he brought out one of his staff members dressed in an alien suit in handcuffs. And then later came out and apologized about it because he then said, no, I really saw this thing as well. The thought that it is flares and all of that, because then the government came out and said, oh, we were dropping flares that night. Well, they weren't. These were not flares, but why would they come out and say that to cover up an event that thousands and thousands of people saw over the span of about 3 or 4 hours? That was a very interesting one because it was so televised. I think it was 97, and they still talk about it all the time.
And one of the first people to actually report that was actually Kurt Russell, the actor.
Yes.
Because he was a pilot and he actually sort of reported seeing something. So he contacted air traffic control or something. So that was quite an interesting thing. And I'm actually pretty certain there must be more footage than we've seen. Because if it's 1,000 people, there must be loads of people with video cameras, and I've only seen about 2 clips or something so far.
Keep in mind 97 too. So video was taken a lot differently back then. Not everybody had cell phones and all that. Yeah, it was just different.
Yeah, VHS or Betamax tapes or something.
You had to grab that brick and run outside.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's an interesting. Why would UFOs fly over a huge area to be deliberately seen? I mean, also, why didn't they fly over during the daytime? It made everyone's job a lot easier because it would be you'd see a huge triangular ship or something. But I remember years ago being told by a friend of mine that it does come from the States that she said that as a kid she was in the back of her car with her brother and cousins, and they were driving back from somewhere. And this would have been probably about the early 1970s. And she said that they all saw this huge craft fly over the car and they could look it up. And she says it was like the size of a football field. It was absolutely huge. And it followed their car back to the house. And they all ran into the house, but a couple of the older cousins, teenagers, said, well, we're going to go out and see it. So they ran out of the house and they saw it and they followed it to the woods and they lost track of it. Then after that, they all forgot about it. No one spoke about it for years. And then one day she brought it up, like 30 years later, says, do you remember that weird UFO we saw as kids? And they said, oh, I thought that was a dream. Everyone thought it was a dream. So I actually wondered if it was some sort of abduction that had happened or something, because that's what a lot of people think when they've encountered a UFO, they think it's a dream, and they kind of wake up from the experience saying, "Oh, I'm sure I had a dream about UFO," but it's because they've been put under by something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
neurologically interacted with, because that's the thing. You get screen memories, which is a lot of people report like owls and things, and then they lost time or specific things, so they can implant. It seems to be that they can implant memories into you, as well as they can delete memories out of you. So if they have that neurological control over you, of course they would have the ability to do that. Then the question, of course, is, well, how the hell did they do that? It's either technology or they're a dimension above us, so they have, it might not be hard for them, right? Or that they really don't want you to remember your experience, but is it because they're doing something nefarious? Or is it kind of like whenever we tranquilize a bear in the woods and put a tracker on it? Because then you've got like that Dr. Robert Lear who kept pulling implants out of people that were of unknown origin, that had bonded to the body, and they had abduction phenomena, or once were regressed once they found out that they had something in them, and then later remembered under hypnosis or whatever that they had actually in fact been abducted and they had no idea. So it could be that they're just studying us. It could be that we are just these entities or these animals to them on a place that they just get to visit every now and then and kind of track our movements like we do a whale in the wild, or study us in some capacity for whatever reason that they've got. The gorilla doesn't know why we trank him and then release him back into the wild. Could be the same thing.
Yeah.
My personal feeling is that there are different factions doing different things in the same way that there are different human factions doing things. So, for instance, if you take the Serengeti and the animals in Africa in the wild, it depends which humans go and visit them. Are they hunters there to kill them? Are they researchers just to neutrally observe? Or are they conservationists who are actively wanting to help the animals and kind of give them medical aid and that kind of thing? I think the UFOs and the ETs are exactly the same. I think you've got the neutral guys who are just observing, see what the humans do. You've got the negative ones who do the abductions and the like horrific things on the tables, and then you got the Bashars, the more like benevolent ones who want to help ascend mankind and kind of help us in some way spiritually. I think this planet is a war zone, quite frankly. I think we're an intergalactic war zone. We are zombie sheep walking around. Most people haven't got a clue what's going on. And then people like us kind of go, ding, there's something up here. There's something going on.
Well, gorillas in the Serengeti haven't got a clue what's going on, do they? They're just eating their shoots and leaves and things.
Level, right? And it is interesting, and to the point that you made, of course, their motives we don't know. And of course, though, if you have multiple entities, multiple different races or crafts or however you want to put it, of course they would have different motives. And yes, no, that's a great observation. Yeah, from one zombie sheep to the other, that's a great observation.
Now, the circles, stone circles, not stone circles, sorry, crop circles you mentioned earlier.
Fascinating.
Are they by the aliens, do you think, ETs, or is it something else doing that?
We know it's not all humans, and we can say that unequivocally. There is something mysterious creating them. There are some that are created by humans, but they're obvious fakes. They are very easy to fake. And if you guys are more curious about this, go check out on Expanding Reality, YouTube or .com or anywhere you can get podcasts. And I did an episode with Darcy Ware and Gary King. Now, Gary King is an expert on crop circles. He has been in over 900 of them since 1997 when he entered his first one. And he has had some incredible experiences firsthand, has seen some incredible ones, and he can definitely spot the difference between fake and real. And by real, we just mean mysterious, right? So one of the interesting things that I learned in that episode with Gary was that there are ghost images that are created. Have you ever heard of ghost crop circles?
No.
Okay, this is cool. So what they do is basically when a crop circle is formed, the interesting part too is it doesn't damage the crop whatsoever. It just bends it over. So there's no damage. It could still be harvested, which is why the farmers don't mind it very much. The farmers the only thing the farmers mind about is all the idiots trampling across the field to go see them and littering and damaging their crops in that way. That's why they don't like it. Some will actually just plow their crop and harvest before anybody finds out about it, just to avoid that type of negativity. So the crop circles themselves, though, seem to have some interesting properties. And there has been Dr. Levengood did some interesting research on where he took seeds and he put them in every stone circle, actually. And they yielded 5% higher than they should have based on electromagnetic properties. But the same thing happens with crop circles as well. There's a higher yield element to them because there's some electromagnetic type of an interference going on there. To the ghost image part of it, whenever a crop circle is harvested, then of course the snow will come down in the winter. the image will still be there.
Mm.
So the snow will fall everywhere except for in that place where the ghost image was.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting too is this can last for a few years. So the next year comes around in spring, they start popping up, crop circles pop up again, they'll pop up on the same one, the snow comes, and then the ghost image of the one before and the one that happened that year are still there. Interesting phenomenon. Mankind can't do that.
It's almost like the alien ETs may have started with flattening crops, but realised that the farmers, it hurts their income and they don't like it, so they've kind of like tried to pull back on how much harm is done, but still kind of getting the image across, which is fascinating.
You know, there was a news report of it back in the 1500s where it was called the mowing devil. And
Hertfordshire, that's my county. It's
okay.
In fact, it's Walken, which is about 10 miles from me. Yeah,
really.
It was in Walken. Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I gotta get over there and check you guys out. So the mowing devil kind of really kicked this thing off, but of course they've probably been going on forever, right? And I asked Darcy on the show. I said, well, why crops, right? And why in this particular area? Why not stones or like the Nazca lines or something, because they're considered geoglyphs, right?
Yeah.
So why not something like that would last a lot longer? And his idea was fascinating. He said, because you wouldn't go to Facebook Messenger and start a conversation and then jump over to email and then jump over to text message. And, it's like you want the same medium, right? And so what's interesting about crops is it can be wiped away. It's not like sand at a beach. It's a very hard medium to work with. And it can be wiped away, but it gets a message across. It's a way of communicating. We haven't really deciphered what's being communicated. The Arecibo event is very interesting because Carl Sagan sent up that plaque with 10 different points on it, showing, or a radio message with 10 different points on it. And it had, we're these humanoids, we live in this star system, we're carbon based and all that. The next year or sometime later, right next to the Arecibo telescope, the exact same 10-point outline was discovered where it had a silicone based life form, and they're from this place with a binary star system, and they look like this, like humanoid, but just bigger heads and a little bit smaller. So that communication in that way was a pretty significant one, I think. But it's a fascinating part of the phenomena that I think a lot of people overlook.
Yeah. I mean, are they still happening now, or is it? I mean, I know they come around every June or whatever.
Yeah, there was one I think last year about that had a COVID molecule in it.
Really?
Like a virus. Yeah. And Gary talked about that on the show too.
Wow.
But you guys should check out Darcy's movie. Crop Circle Realities is the name of that movie, and that's why I had him and Gary on. Plus, they're just great to talk to. It was a
Excellent. Now, do you think that the idea of these ghost images of crop circle, that could be caused by some sort of radioactivity or something that they put in the crops or something?
Possibly, or part of the process, right? So what they have found in crops whenever they cut them open was little microscopic balls of iron ore. And so there's magnetic and electrostatic element to this. So that could be what affects the crops later on, but they're still harvestable. That's the thing, is that they're not damaged in the way that we think, right? They're just bent over. They're not trampled and therefore killed.
So
it's really interesting.
So when you have your breakfast cereal, when they say fortified with vitamin and ions, that's what they're talking about.
It'd be a great company to start, actually. These wheats were grown in a crop circle.
Yeah.
That's why they're $5 more, right?
That explains the glow on the ready bread.
Yeah, right.
There's a niche market.
There's a free tinfoil hat folded up inside of the box that you can wear.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic. Well, we're coming to a close now, actually. It's been a fascinating 2 hours almost of chatting with Brandon Thomas of Expanding Reality Podcast. So, Brandon, whilst we've got a few minutes left, if you just want to tell people more about the show and the podcast you do and how they can get it and everything.
Sure. Just wanted to say, guys, that I'm grateful that you had me on. This was a blast, and y'all are welcome on my show anytime. And that's what the beauty of this kind of interaction is. So my show, actually, you can find at expandingrealitypodcast.com. That's kind of the central hub for everything. All of the episodes will be up there, the audio versions of them. Also, the show is spit out to, I think, about 16 or 18 different podcast platforms. So wherever you listen to podcasts, it's probably there. If not, write me in at expandingrealitypodcast@gmail.com, and I will get on that platform for you. From the website, you can find me. That's where all the socials are, right? So your Facebooks, Instagrams, Twitters. I just got on TikTok, which has been a lot of fun. That's where you can find all me pulling snakes out of coops, build videos and stuff like that. As well as just some interesting thing. Neil, you have a couple of clips up there that have done very well. So the TikTok world loves you already. And YouTube, guys, you can find my show. There's an audio version of it, but there's also a video element to it where we show the conversations. I know recently I did a flat Earth one, which was fascinating. I've had James Fox of the Phenomena on, of course, Neil Donald Walsh, like we talked about, but tons of fantastic guests, and it's a wide variety of topics. So y'all come on over, check it out, and any feedback is always welcome. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And just as we close, then, the flat Earth, was you convinced by their arguments?
I find it incredibly compelling for one main reason. Well, for several reasons, actually. Number one, I'm very open to the idea of what this reality is. If it's a simulation, of course, the idea of a flat plane or an eternal plane, or this area is like your map on a video game, then that makes sense. There's some compelling arguments that he puts forward. The issues I've got with NASA, even though I interviewed a guy who worked for NASA for 40 years, my second and third show was with him. I've got a lot of issues with them faking zero gravity. And if they fake it one time, you've got to ask yourself why, as well as some stuff that came out about the moon landing, which I know you guys know nothing about. And so, no, because you do your other show. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the interesting, it's just the messed up stuff with NASA, with the things like that. He has some, like I said, incredibly compelling arguments. And the thing that interests me about the flat Earth model is not the, oh, well, you can fall off the edge kind of a thing. It's the idea that it's an infinite plane, right? And if there is a ring around the outside, if you follow the thought experiment, then there could be other land masses outside of that. Because even Admiral Byrd said that when he was down at the South Pole, that he saw a vast continent larger than the United States, as yet uninhabited by anybody else. There's hot spots down there. There's geothermal anomalies that occur down there that shouldn't be, if it is what they say that it is. The Antarctic Treaty is pretty suspect. Flight paths in the Southern Hemisphere are very interesting. So like I said, it's compelling. I don't plant my flag. I'm open to the idea of it being flat or round. And honestly, it doesn't matter. But it's just interesting to think
It's an absolute minefield.
It is, and it's been the most polarizing episode I've ever released, though. And I will say that 99% of people who come out with the loudest voices about all the hate stuff that they say have never looked into it seriously, and that's just the reality of it. You can, because it's such an erroneous idea, right? It's kind of like Project Bluebeam. It's so crazy that it just might be the way that it is.
Although the conversations I've had, the small ones I've had with flat earthers, is that they tell me the Earth is flat and stuff like that. And I said, well, okay, tell me what about the other planets that you have looked at through your telescope in your back garden. What shape are they? And 9 times out of 10, they don't own a telescope, and they've never actually looked at other planets to kind of at least back up their argument, you know. And if they could look at other planets and see they're spherical, the moon being the first obvious one, the biggest one to see that you can see a curvature on it when you're looking through a telescope, especially. You know, you'd have to ask what kind of gravitational mystical forces out there making those spherical, but this one flat that we're on.
The interesting part is, because if you follow the video game model as well, the video game, of course, you look up and the moon on the video game is spherical, but you look on the ground around you in your observation, it's flat. So I think that both can exist in the same place at the same time, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that all planets are flat or that they all form that way. Or that they're even planets at all. The interesting idea that David brought up on the show is that they're heavenly bodies, spirit souls in another dimension in a blanket above us. Because really, the sky does act like a clock, basically. So it's a very predictable clock. The seasons, the times, the oscillation between the tropics can all be explained in this model. So again, it's compelling. I'm not planting my flag as far as I'm a flat earther, but I will say that after having him on and seriously considering it, it's an interesting and compelling idea. I will put
interesting,
as they say. Yeah, keep it open.
Okay, we'll better draw this show to a close then. So thank you very much.
A few plugs, Neil.
Yes, go for it.
If people can join the Paranormal Peep Show on Facebook and YouTube, and also tuned in events, and something actually that's nothing to do with any of us, but I think that Brandon might like. I don't know if you've heard of the Confessionals at all on YouTube.
The Confessionals, Tony Merkel.
That's the one.
Yeah, he's great.
Very interesting stuff. Yes. I think you would like the episode where allegedly a special forces guy went to rescue some information from a downed ship that turned out to be a spaceship. And then when they went back on board their kind of like actual physical ship at the sea, because they were naval US Navy SEALs, apparently, they then went to go and rescue a unit that was out looking for a spaceship that turned out to be themselves.
Wow.
Yeah, once you get your head around that,
cool.
Yeah, and there's some other really, really weird things going on with that as well, to do with time.
Tony does a wonderful show. That is a very cool one.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so, what was that show called again? I'll look out for it.
The Confessionals on YouTube.
Confessionals. Yeah, what is it? A drama or a real?
Oh, it's like this. It's a podcast.
Just a podcast discussion. Okay.
And so it goes out on all podcast platforms for Tony as well. So Tony is his name. Very cool guy. Yeah.
Okay, we'll look out for that one, as well as Expanding Reality and also the Paranormal Peep Show then on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. So it's good night from myself and Andy, and good night from Brandon.
Good night all.
See you later.
For having me, guys.
Cheers. Good night all. Thanks for joining us.